Have you ever been asked, "What did you do this weekend?" and suddenly had no idea what to say?
Well, not because you don't know English, not because you don't know the words.
But because you think your weekend wasn't interesting enough.
The truth is, most people don't have exciting weekends. They just know how to turn ordinary moments into conversations.
And in today's episode, you'll learn how to do exactly that.
So even if you stayed home all weekend, you'll still have plenty to talk about.
All right, let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Actify English. I'm Tony, and I'm very happy you're here with us today. Whether you're driving, cooking, walking, or just relaxing, thank you for spending a little time with us.
And I'm Emma. It's great to be here again. I hope you're having a wonderful day.
Today, we're talking about something very simple. At least it sounds simple. The question is, what did you do this weekend?
Oh, that's a question people hear all the time.
Exactly. At work, at school, when meeting friends, at parties, or even when talking to neighbors.
Sometimes it's the first question people ask on Monday morning.
Yes, someone smiles and says, "Hey, what did you do this weekend?" And suddenly, your mind goes blank.
I know that feeling. You understand every word in the question, but finding an answer can be difficult.
Very difficult for many English learners. And what's interesting is that most learners already know a lot of English words.
Right. They know words like movie, family, coffee, shopping, walking, cooking, and relaxing.
But when it's time to speak, they don't know where to start.
Sometimes they think their weekend wasn't interesting enough.
Yes, that's a big one. People often think, I didn't travel, I didn't do anything exciting, I stayed home.
And then they feel like they have nothing to say.
And that's what surprises me. Most people don't have exciting weekends every week.
Actually, last weekend, I spent a lot of time cleaning my apartment.
Really? See, that's actually a perfect example, because people talk about things like that all the time.
They do. Real conversations are often about very normal things.
You know, I think many learners imagine they need a big story.
Like climbing a mountain or flying to another country?
Exactly. But most weekend conversations are much simpler than that.
Sometimes my friends and I talk for 10 minutes about a new coffee shop or a movie we watched at home.
And nobody thinks that's boring.
Not at all, because the conversation isn't really about the activity. It's about sharing experiences.
That's a great point.
Another thing that makes speaking difficult is worrying about mistakes.
Oh yes, grammar worries.
Some learners start thinking, should I use this tense? Is this sentence correct? Did I say that right?
And while they're thinking about grammar, the conversation keeps moving.
Then they become nervous, and when people are nervous, speaking becomes harder.
I remember doing that when I was learning another language. I knew what I wanted to say, but I spent so much time checking my grammar in my head that I couldn't speak naturally.
That happens to so many people.
The good news is that most people don't expect perfect English.
They just want to have a conversation.
Right, a simple conversation, not a perfect conversation.
If you're listening right now and you've ever felt nervous answering a question about your weekend, you're definitely not alone.
And today, we're going to make that question much easier.
And before we continue, if you're enjoying these English conversations, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a new episode.
We post new listening and speaking practice every week. And if you know someone who's trying to feel more confident speaking English, feel free to share this episode with them.
We'd love to have you join us for more conversations like this.
Now, let's keep going.
We'll share real examples, real stories, and real weekend conversations.
You'll hear simple ways to talk about your weekend. You'll hear how people keep a conversation going, and you might discover that you have much more to say than you think.
I think that's what happens. Most people already have stories, they just don't realize it.
That's a really interesting idea.
It is. Sometimes the quiet weekends are actually easier to talk about.
That makes me curious. If many weekends are actually quite ordinary, then what makes some weekend stories interesting to listen to?
That's a great question.
So what actually makes a weekend story interesting?
Well, I think a lot of people start with the wrong idea.
What do you mean?
They think an interesting weekend means doing something big, maybe traveling to another city, going to a concert, or having some amazing adventure.
That's exactly what I imagine when someone says, I had a great weekend.
Really?
Yeah, I immediately think they did something exciting.
That's funny because my last weekend was not exciting at all.
Oh, now I'm curious.
On Saturday morning, I went grocery shopping.
That's it?
That's how it started.
I was expecting a much bigger story.
See, that's the problem. We think simple things aren't worth talking about.
Maybe because social media makes everything look exciting.
That's what I mean. You open your phone and someone is hiking in the mountains.
Or sitting on a beach.
Or eating at a beautiful restaurant.
Meanwhile, most of us are standing in a supermarket trying to choose between two brands of pasta.
That's much closer to real life.
It definitely is.
After grocery shopping, I went home and cleaned my apartment.
Wow, this weekend keeps getting more exciting.
I know, try not to be jealous.
I'll do my best.
Then I cooked dinner. Nothing special, just a simple pasta dish.
Actually, that sounds nice.
It was. I put on some music and took my time.
You know what's interesting? When you describe it like that, it doesn't sound boring.
That's because experiences are often about small details.
Right. If you simply say, I cooked dinner, the story ends.
But if you say, I tried a new recipe and listened to music while cooking, people can imagine it.
And suddenly there's more to talk about.
And that's where the story begins.
My weekend wasn't very exciting either.
Really? What did you do?
I watched the movie at home on Saturday night.
What movie?
See? That's what happens. One simple sentence creates another question.
I didn't even notice that.
The movie itself wasn't even the best part. I spent 20 minutes trying to choose what to watch.
That happens to me all the time.
And now we're having a conversation about it.
Because it's relatable.
I think that's an important word.
Relatable?
Yes, people connect with things they understand.
That's why simple stories often work better than big stories.
How so?
Most people have gone grocery shopping. Most people have cleaned their home. Most people have watched movies or cooked dinner.
So they can see themselves in the story.
People recognize themselves in it.
What about family? I think family is another common weekend topic.
Definitely. Sometimes I visit my parents on weekends.
And that's a very normal thing to do.
Yes, we drink coffee, talk about life, and maybe have lunch together.
Nothing dramatic,
Nothing dramatic at all.
but many listeners probably do something similar.
Which makes it easy to talk about and easy to understand.
So maybe the problem isn't having a boring weekend.
I don't think so.
Maybe the real problem is not knowing how to tell the story.
That's exactly how I see it.
You don't need a more exciting life.
You just need to notice the small moments in the life you already have.
That's a much nicer way to think about it.
It certainly removes a lot of pressure.
And honestly, I think listeners might be surprised by how much they already have to talk about.
I've noticed that too. Even an ordinary weekend can contain lots of little stories.
Speaking of that, why don't we look at a real example?
Sounds good. Can you walk us through one of your weekends from start to finish and show us how an ordinary weekend becomes a conversation?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Great. Let's hear about your weekend.
Okay, it wasn't a special weekend, but it was a nice one.
Those are often the best weekends.
Maybe. Well, on Saturday, I slept in.
Really? What time did you wake up?
Around 9 o'clock.
That's sleeping in for you?
It is. During the week, I usually wake up much earlier.
I was expecting something like 11 o'clock.
No, 9 is enough for me.
How did you feel when you woke up?
Relaxed. I didn't need to rush anywhere, and that felt great.
I love that feeling.
Me too. Then I made myself a cup of coffee.
Are you one of those people who needs coffee immediately?
Absolutely.
I knew it.
I sat near the window, drank my coffee, and just enjoyed a quiet morning.
That sounds peaceful.
It really was. Sometimes I think quiet mornings are underrated.
That's something people forget. People talk a lot about exciting activities, but a peaceful morning can be wonderful.
Exactly. After that, I decided to visit a local market near my apartment.
Oh, nice. How was it?
It was busy, but in a good way. There were lots of people walking around, buying food, and talking with each other.
What do you like about local markets?
I like looking at fresh fruit and vegetables, and I enjoy seeing what people are buying.
That's interesting. I usually go to a market, buy what I need, and leave.
Really?
I'm very efficient.
I'm the opposite. I like taking my time.
So, how long were you there?
Maybe an hour.
An hour?
Don't judge me.
I'm trying not to.
I walked around, looked at different stalls, and bought a few things for dinner.
Did you find anything interesting?
Actually, yes. I found a small bakery I had never noticed before.
That's always exciting.
I bought a pastry and it was delicious.
Would you go back?
Definitely.
See, that's already a great little story.
And nothing dramatic happened.
And that's the point.
Later that afternoon, I met a friend for lunch.
A friend you've known for a long time?
Yes, we've been friends for years.
That's nice. What did you talk about?
Honestly, a little bit of everything. Work, family, travel plans, and some funny memories from college.
Those are usually the best conversations.
They are. We laughed a lot.
Did you stay out all day?
No, after lunch I came home and relaxed.
What did relaxing look like?
I read a few pages of a book, listened to music, and did absolutely nothing for a while.
That sounds like a successful Saturday.
I thought so.
What about Sunday?
Sunday was much less exciting.
Let's hear it anyway.
Well, I started by cleaning my apartment.
Ah, yes, the famous Sunday cleaning session.
Exactly.
Do you enjoy cleaning?
Not really,
That's the answer I expected.
but I enjoy having a clean apartment afterward. Same here.
The cleaning part is not fun. The result is fun.
That's pretty much it.
How long did it take?
About 2 hours.
That's impressive.
I wanted everything ready for the new week.
I understand that.
After cleaning, I made lunch and watched a documentary.
Really? What was it about?
It was about wildlife and nature.
Did you enjoy it?
Very much. I learned a few things, and the photography was beautiful.
Would you recommend it?
Yes, I would.
I might have to watch it.
Then, in the evening, I prepared for the week ahead.
What kind of preparation?
I checked my calendar, made a small to-do list, and planned a few meals.
That's very organized.
I try to be.
And how did you feel on Sunday night?
Calm. I felt ready for Monday.
You know what's interesting?
What?
Nothing in your story was extraordinary,
Not really.
but I was interested the whole time.
Really?
Yes, because I kept asking questions.
I never thought about it that way.
Every time you shared one small detail, there was something else to talk about.
You're right. A simple weekend suddenly became a much longer conversation.
And I think that's something many listeners don't realize.
What do you mean?
They think they need a bigger story, but maybe they just need better follow-up questions.
They think they need a bigger story, but maybe they just need better follow-up questions.
I completely agree.
Actually, your weekend story reminded me of something.
What's that?
A lot of people believe good conversations come from having interesting things to say.
I used to think that too.
Really?
Yes, I thought good communicators always had exciting stories and clever ideas.
And now?
Now, I think good communicators are often just very curious people.
That's interesting.
They listen carefully and ask questions.
You know what? Let's compare two conversations.
Good idea.
Imagine I ask you, what did you do this weekend?
Okay.
What did you do this weekend?
I watched a movie.
Nice. Nice.
Well, that conversation ended quickly.
Very quickly.
Maybe 5 seconds?
Exactly. Nobody did anything wrong, but nobody gave the conversation room to grow.
Let's try again.
Okay. What did you do this weekend?
I watched a movie.
What movie did you watch?
I watched a comedy.
Oh, nice. Who did you watch it with?
My sister.
Was it good?
Yes, it was really funny.
Would you recommend it?
Definitely.
See what happened?
The conversation became much longer.
And neither person needed amazing English.
That's easy to forget.
We often think conversation is about giving long answers.
But sometimes it's about asking simple questions.
That's what many people miss.
And those questions don't need to be complicated.
Not at all.
Questions like, how was it? Or did you enjoy it? Can keep a conversation moving.
I use those questions all the time.
Me too.
Actually, I noticed something while listening to your weekend story earlier.
What did you notice?
Every time you mentioned something, I became curious.
Like when I talked about the market?
Exactly. You said you visited a market.
And then you asked what I liked about it.
Right. Then you mentioned the bakery.
And you asked if I would go back.
Because I was genuinely interested.
That's the key word.
Interested?
Yes. People can usually tell when you're truly listening.
They really can.
If you're only waiting for your turn to speak, the conversation feels different.
I think many people have experienced that.
Someone asks a question, but they don't really care about the answer.
And it feels a little strange.
It does.
So follow-up questions are not just about talking longer.
They're about showing interest in the other person.
That's probably the difference.
Imagine your friend says, I visited my family this weekend.
Okay.
You could simply say, nice.
Or I could ask, how are they?
Now the conversation has somewhere to go.
Or when was the last time you saw them?
Or even, did you have a good time?
Suddenly, there are many directions the conversation can go.
Because one answer creates another question.
You know what's funny?
What?
Sometimes I worry about saying the perfect thing.
Really?
Yes. Then I remember that asking a simple question is often enough.
I feel the same way.
That's actually good news for English learners.
Why?
Because you don't need a huge vocabulary to be a good conversationalist.
Most people forget that.
You can have a great conversation with simple questions.
Questions like, really? How was it? What happened next?
Those little questions are surprisingly powerful.
They are. They make people feel heard.
And when people feel heard, they usually want to keep talking.
People like talking to someone who listens.
So maybe conversation success isn't about speaking more.
Maybe it's about being more curious.
That's a helpful way to think about it.
It certainly makes conversations feel easier.
But now I'm thinking about something else.
What's that?
We've talked about normal weekends. We've talked about pleasant weekends.
Fair point.
But weekends don't always go smoothly, do they?
Definitely not.
Sometimes plans change. Sometimes things go wrong.
And sometimes those unexpected moments become the most memorable stories.
Now that's interesting. What happens when a weekend doesn't go as planned? Now that's interesting. What happens when a weekend doesn't go as planned?
Honestly, sometimes those are the weekends I remember most.
Really?
Oh yes. Let me tell you about one weekend that started with a very good plan.
That already sounds dangerous.
It was. A friend and I wanted to spend Saturday outdoors.
What were you planning to do?
We were going to visit a beautiful park outside the city. We packed snacks, brought water, and even checked a map the night before.
Wow, you were prepared.
That's what I thought.
Uh-oh.
Exactly. I woke up on Saturday morning, looked out the window, and saw dark clouds everywhere.
Let me guess. Rain.
Lots of rain.
That's disappointing.
It really was. We had been talking about that trip for weeks.
Did you cancel it?
We tried to stay positive at first. We kept saying, maybe the rain will stop.
Famous last words.
Very famous. It did not stop.
Not even a little?
Not even a little.
So what happened next?
We decided to drive into the city instead and find something else to do.
That sounds reasonable.
It would have been, except there was terrible traffic.
Of course there was.
We spent almost an hour moving very slowly.
I hate that feeling.
Me too, especially when you're already disappointed.
It's like the day keeps getting worse.
It really did.
Did things improve after that?
Well, we finally found a restaurant we wanted to try.
Finally, some good news.
That's what we thought.
Let me guess. More bad news?
The food wasn't very good.
Oh, no.
We had seen great reviews online. We were really excited.
That's the worst part. High expectations.
Yes. If you expect something amazing and it's only okay, it feels disappointing.
So your outdoor trip was canceled, you got stuck in traffic, and the restaurant wasn't good.
When you say it like that, it sounds terrible.
It sounds like a very long day.
It was.
Looking back, were you upset?
At the time, yes, but now I actually laugh about it.
That's interesting.
Because the problems became the story.
I never thought about it that way.
Nobody remembers me sitting at home on a normal weekend, but people remember the weekend when everything went wrong.
Maybe that's why it still stands out.
What about you? Have you ever had a weekend disaster?
Oh, absolutely.
I want to hear this.
Well, a few months ago, a friend invited me to a special dinner.
Sounds nice.
It was supposed to be. The problem was that I completely forgot about it.
No.
Yes.
How do you forget something like that?
That's a great question. I wish I knew.
What happened?
I was relaxing at home when my phone rang.
Uh-oh.
My friend asked, "Where are you?"
That's never a good sign.
I looked at the clock and immediately realized my mistake.
Were you late?
Very.
How late?
About 40 minutes.
Ouch!
That's exactly what I said.
Did you get there eventually?
I did, but by the time I arrived, they had already given our table to another group.
So you missed the reservation?
Completely.
That's painful.
It was embarrassing too.
I can imagine.
The funny thing is that everyone was actually very understanding.
Really?
Yes, I was probably more upset than they were.
That happens sometimes.
I spent the whole evening apologizing.
And what did you learn?
2 things.
I'm listening.
First, always check your calendar.
I should probably do that too.
Second, mistakes feel huge when they happen, but they usually become funny stories later.
I think so too. You know, listening to both of our stories, I'm noticing something.
What's that?
We don't remember the plan.
That's what sticks with us.
We don't remember the plan, we remember the unexpected moment.
The surprise, the mistake, the problem.
Maybe that's why unusual moments stay with us for so long.
That's a good point. Maybe that's why unusual moments stay with us for so long.
I think so too.
You know, listening to our stories, I'm noticing something else.
What's that?
I don't think we actually remember activities very well.
That's interesting.
I think we remember feelings.
I can see that.
For example, people might forget where they went or what they ate.
But they remember how they felt.
That's usually true.
That reminds me of something that happened a few months ago.
Let's hear it.
I was walking around a neighborhood I didn't know very well.
Okay.
I wasn't looking for anything special. I was just exploring.
I like doing that sometimes.
Me too. Then I noticed a very small cafe on a quiet street.
One of those places you would normally walk past?
Exactly.
So you went inside.
I did.
How was it?
The coffee was good. The place was beautiful. But honestly, that's not what I remember most.
Really?
What I remember is how I felt.
How did you feel?
Peaceful.
That's a nice feeling.
It is. Life had been very busy at the time. Work was stressful. I had a lot on my mind.
I know that feeling.
Then I sat down with a cup of coffee, and suddenly everything felt calm.
So when you think about that weekend, you remember the feeling more than the cafe itself.
That's right.
That's fascinating.
What about you?
Mine is a little different.
Tell me.
One evening, I was walking home after dinner.
Okay.
I can say it had been a completely normal day.
And then?
I saw a beautiful sunset.
The one you mentioned earlier?
Yes.
What do you remember most about it?
Not the colors.
Really?
Not really. What I remember is feeling grateful.
Grateful.
Yeah, for a few minutes I stopped thinking about work, emails, and everything else.
I like that.
I just stood there and enjoyed the moment.
That's a wonderful feeling.
It is, and that's what stayed with me.
You know, this reminds me of another memory.
Oh,
I once had a funny misunderstanding with a stranger at a market.
the woman on the phone?
That's right.
I still laugh when I think about that story.
Me too.
What feeling do you remember from that moment?
Embarrassment at first.
I can imagine.
But then it became laughter.
That's true.
We both started laughing, and suddenly it wasn't embarrassing anymore.
It became a funny memory.
Pretty much.
So maybe that's the real secret.
What do you mean?
A lot of people think interesting stories come from interesting activities.
But that's not always true.
Sometimes the activity is very ordinary.
Drinking coffee.
Walking home.
Shopping at a market.
The memorable part is the emotion.
Feeling peaceful.
Feeling grateful.
Feeling surprised.
Or even feeling embarrassed for a few seconds.
That's such a good point.
And the great thing for English learners is that emotions are easy to talk about.
Very true.
You don't need advanced vocabulary.
You can simply say, I was happy.
I was surprised.
I felt relaxed.
I felt nervous.
Those simple feelings can make a story much more interesting.
Because people connect with emotions.
We all do.
So if you're thinking about your own weekend, maybe don't ask yourself, what did I do?
Maybe ask yourself, how did I feel?
That's a great question.
And it might help you discover a story you didn't realize you had.
Speaking of that, how can listeners start using these ideas right away in their own conversations? Speaking of that, how can listeners start using these ideas right away in their own conversations?
I think the easiest way is to stop looking for a perfect story.
That's a good point.
A lot of people think nothing interesting happened this weekend.
I've definitely felt that before.
Really?
Sure. Sometimes someone asks me about my weekend and my first thought is, honestly, not much.
And then what happens?
Then I start talking and realize there was actually more to the story.
I think that happens to a lot of people.
Maybe you didn't travel anywhere.
Maybe you stayed home.
Maybe you ran errands.
Maybe you cleaned your apartment.
None of those things sound very exciting at first.
But once you start talking about them, little details appear.
Like the bakery you discovered.
Or the movie you spent 20 minutes choosing.
I'm still embarrassed about that.
You should be.
Thanks, Emma.
You're welcome.
So if you're listening right now, think about your own weekend for a moment.
Not the perfect version.
Not the version you would post online.
Just the real version.
Was there a moment that made you smile?
Was there something unexpected?
Did anything go wrong?
Did you learn something?
Or maybe you simply had a peaceful moment you enjoyed.
Sometimes that's enough.
Actually, I think that's one of the biggest lessons from today's conversation.
What's that?
Interesting conversations don't always start with interesting activities.
I agree.
They often start with simple observations.
Or simple feelings.
I felt relaxed.
I felt surprised.
I felt frustrated.
I felt happy.
Those are small sentences.
But they can lead to meaningful conversations.
And here's something else I've noticed.
What?
The more curious you are, the easier conversations become.
That's true.
You don't have to carry the whole conversation by yourself.
Sometimes all you need is one good question.
Like, what happened next?
Or how did that make you feel?
Exactly.
Suddenly the conversation keeps moving.
So if you're listening today, here's a small challenge.
The next time someone asks about your weekend, don't stop after one sentence.
Add one more detail.
Share one feeling.
Or ask one follow-up question.
That's it.
Nothing complicated.
Just one small step.
Because confidence doesn't come from perfect English.
It comes from using English.
Again and again.
In real conversations.
And honestly, I think most people already have more stories than they realize.
I think so too.
Looking back at everything we've talked about today, a few ideas really stand out to me.
Same here.
Looking back at everything we've discussed today, I think a few simple lessons stand out the most.
I think so too.
First, an ordinary weekend is enough.
Absolutely.
You don't need to travel across the world.
You don't need an exciting adventure every Saturday.
A quiet weekend can still be a great conversation.
Sometimes the simplest stories are the easiest to connect with.
Another thing we learned is that follow-up questions are incredibly powerful.
Yes, good conversations don't happen because one person talks all the time.
They happen because people are curious about each other.
A simple question can turn a short answer into a meaningful conversation.
We also talked about small moments.
Those unexpected little moments.
A hidden cafe.
A beautiful sunset.
A funny misunderstanding.
Things that seem small at the time but stay in our memories.
And let's not forget the mistakes.
Definitely not.
Missed plans, bad weather, traffic, forgotten reservations.
Those moments can be frustrating.
But they often become the stories we tell later.
That's so true.
So here's something we'd like every listener to remember.
Don't wait for a perfect life before speaking English.
Don't wait for perfect grammar.
Don't wait for a perfect story.
Start with your real life.
Start with your real experiences.
Because every weekend is a story.
And every story is an opportunity to practice English.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us today.
We hope this conversation gave you a little more confidence.
If you enjoyed listening, think about your own weekend and try sharing one small story out loud today.
You might be surprised by how much you already have to say.
Until next time, take care, keep listening, and keep speaking.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next episode of Actify English.